Hey, Snackers, this is Kareem Iskander.
Hey everyone, Matt DeNapoli here.
Welcome to episode 190 of Snack Minute.
This week we're going to be joined by Shannon McFarland, who's going to talk to us about actually something that Kareem and I talked about a few weeks ago. But I think we kind of put the cart before the horse on MCP, Kareem, don't you think? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You did a great job with the implementation, but we kind of were sitting there going, well, maybe we should level set on what MCP is. We kind of mentioned it a little bit, but we thought it'd be good to bring in what I would call Cisco's resident expert on model context protocol. He would probably beg to differ, but Shannon's here again with us. Shannon, for our newbies, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then we'll jump right into it.
Absolutely. So great to be on another Snack Minutes. This is always one of my favorite things to do. So appreciate you having me on. My name is Shannon McFarland. I'm the VP and head of both Cisco DevNet, the Developer Relations Organization, and also Cisco OSPO, which is the open source program office for Cisco. And happy to be here.
Beginning of this year, you started bandying about some terms that I panicked because I didn't know what they meant. You were talking about MCP and ACP. And then so I did a little research and I kind of figured out at least what they were contextually. No pun intended. And then in April, you came out with you started a blog series called MCP for DevOps, where you started to jump into what MCP was and why we had to care about it. But kind of, can you do a little TLDR on that aspect of it, kind of high level, why people should care, and then we'll dig into some of the details of implementations.
Yeah, absolutely. So Model Context Protocol, MCP, was created by Anthropic as an open source effort that folks can utilize whenever they have AI assistants or agents or any AI-enabled application that needs to talk to what we call tools. And these tools are a wide range of things. It could be an API. It could be utilizing what's now known as a connector. So this could be a service that is like GitHub, or Jenkins or Asana or something like that, where you have an established service, again, something that you can get to through infrastructure as code or an API as an example, and you need to present that interface to something like a large language model. And so that's really all Model Context Protocol is it allows me to go into my AI application, let's call it a chat interface, and it captures the context of what I need from that large language model. It determines that the large language model can't actually sort that out on its own, and it needs to make a tool call to some tool to gather additional information. So it could be that I've got a tool utilizing GitHub. And so I ask, hey, give me a list of all of the repos that have to do with learning labs, right? And so it would know that the large language model may understand that there is a DevNet learning lab, but it has no means to actually give me a real current view of all of the repos of those learning labs. And so it would decide there's a tool that can provide that functionality. It wraps up the context of that, hands it over to MCP, and MCP is basically kind of a translator. It's taking JSON information on one side, and it's interpreting what the destination of the MCP server, GitHub in this case, and it wraps up that context to properly ask, give me a list of these repos in this particular organization. And so that's basically a use case and summary of MCP.
To me, originally when MCP came out, it sounded like a replacement for retrieval augmented generative tooling. Does it fully replace that? And second question, are there other elements that people were leveraging LLMs in a way that MCP either augments or replaces from ways that they were using them before?
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
Just one thing. What's ACP? Matt mentioned something about MCP and ACP.
Oh, yeah. So really quick, ACP was an agentic communication protocol. That was a project under the agency.org project that, as of yesterday, good question, we'll pay you later on this, Kareem, but yesterday, agency.org actually was donated to the Linux Foundation yesterday. And so ACP was an original communication protocol. It predated even A2A as a means for an agent talking to an agent to have proper communication context and so forth between those two. And so ACP has now been replaced by SLIM, which I believe you've got somebody from agency that's going to be talking about some of that stuff in a future snack minute. But that was ACP.
Right on.
Does it replace RAG? Well, it is an option for your AI tooling to go and leverage tools if they are appropriate when RAG doesn't get me what I need, right? So if I actually take a snapshot of a large language model and what it was trained on, RAG allows me to augment that data by pointing to RAG information that is either updated or expansive of the original training of the LLM. So if that information, if the LLM can get it to me, great. If I need to go to RAG for additional data context, that's great. But the moment that those two things fail on me and I need to now sort out that there is a tool available for me to go get a different kind of data than maybe what exists in RAG, it would then move to that as kind of almost an if-then kind of tree of decisions.
And there's also, I think there's also something to add to that and then correct me, Shannon, if I'm wrong, but with RAG, you don't have the ability to open up APIs from a service to make it available to the model itself, right? Because you're just pushing documents in the vector database with RAG or even RAG as a service, as opposed to MCP is you open up an entire API endpoint to it. Is that correct?
That's totally correct. Yeah, I mean, and so this is where MCP becomes a real big game changer, right? Is because what if you actually gathered information from an MCP-oriented tool, a list in a YAML output of a key value, pull from all of your GitHub repos. So you got that information from GitHub through an MCP call, but now you want to update a RAG entry with that data, right? And so you could create circular logic here where the LLM is groovy, gives me a lot. RAG is not actually got the information I'm looking for. I make a tool call, get that data, and then actually push that into another RAG instance for me to be able to pull from later, right? And so this is why MCP is such a great additive aspect to your overall AI architectures, because it allows you to get from a diverse number of sources information that would be extremely difficult to actually just get into RAG by itself.
I've been thinking of this akin to SDKs, specifically for Cisco platforms, because we look at for automation and programmability from that perspective of what can we do with Ansible, what can we do with Terraform, what can we do with an SDK. I foresee this happening with MCP servers as well, where we'll be opening up the ability to tie into Cisco platforms with a variety of MCP servers. I wouldn't see, and maybe you see this differently, and you can comment on that, a holistic Cisco MCP server, right?
I think we want to have targeted MCP servers that are per function, because one of the challenges you get from an implementation point of view is a limit on tool calling.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say I've got, a Cisco NSO MCP server, right? And so I've got an NSO implementation. My MCP server knows about the NSO API. And then that's kind of at the top level of the tree. But within the server are actual tool call mechanisms. So it is a list of things I can do against that targeted environment. So it could be that I can do read operations, write operations, basically CRUD functionality. And the more of those tools that you stack on, when your AI application has to make a tool call, it's got to go through every one of those tools times all of the MCP servers to sort out actually which thing do I need to aim at that API, right? And so it's a very complex operation when you actually, look at it under the microscope. And so having a big, giant Uber Cisco MCP server with gajillions of tool calls literally is just not a scalable function, right? And so you really want to have them targeted, and you want to have them highly optimized so that you're not injecting tool decisions in your AI application that really just don't apply.
This goes back to what Shannon's talking about. Again, we put the cart before the horse, because the episode I talked about was bringing in all these tools from the Open API specs. But then they're not really useful because you have 855 Meraki endpoints that it has to traverse to make a decision. What you got to do is use that routed approach where you define the routes that you want to expose only to your model, and that's it. And that's when it becomes really useful. And when we talk about AI snackers in general, it's really important to define the first step, and we said that in the previous episode, is define the use case that you're trying to accomplish. From the use case, define the tools that you want to do and expose, not the other way around. Don't give it everything and then go figure out the use case that I want. Shannon is spot on with this.
Wow, that's a first.
I was going to say I knew that answer, but and set Shannon to knock it out of the park, but I didn't fully understand that concept until just now. See, Shannon's really good at teaching me things to this day.
Do you have a specific use case you want to cover with, like, now that we introduced MCP, you gave an example with GitHub. Do you have an actual use case that's relevant to either DevOps or us in general, what we do in our world?
Absolutely. So Matt had alluded to a series that I started off, and I'm picking back up some of the testing of that this week, which is really to kind of start with the introduction of MCP and some common tools that are out there. I've mentioned GitHub a few times, but some of the guidance that I'm going through in that blog series is there's lots of MCP servers that are out there from vendors. Those are the ones that you want to kind of go after, right? An official GitHub, an official Netbox lab, an official Argo CD. Those types of things that are actually vetted from that organization are the things that you want to kind of start with. But you also want to be very careful because it is the wild, wild west show on MCP servers. I mean, Kareem built one. Who would use that?
Exactly. I shouldn't be even allowed to build an MCP server.
Yeah, you got to be careful about, oh my God, I have found the world's greatest MCP server from, Joe, and I don't know who Joe is, and I don't actually understand the code in his MCP server. So that's where you need to kind of create a short list and focus what your goals are for talking to all of these different tool sets. And so a good use case is really thinking through your day job. Let's take automation for an example. So am I scraping information out of Netbox? I take that information and I want to get that information into like an Ansible playbook. And so I'm going through a templatization process. I may dump that into GitHub. And then once that's in GitHub, when I look at the source of that GitHub repo, my CI system may pick up that change and then go through a process of calling Ansible, going out to an API or going out to maybe a DevNet sandbox and connecting in and orchestrating that Ansible playbook, right? And so you've walked through an entire life cycle there by looking at Netbox, extracting data, dumping the data into GitHub, CI picks up the change, goes and triggers the Ansible implementation against whatever the destination is. So start with that kind of workflow and see how the context really works, meaning don't ask that entire workflow in one prompt in your Cursor or VS Code IDE, right? Walk through it step by step. And so that would be a common use case that I would have people start with from an operation point of view.
Shannon, I think that this is great information for our snackers to get started. Snackers, I implore you to go check out Shannon's blog series on blogs.cisco.com/developer. It sounds like we can expect more from you in the coming months, Shannon, on MCP servers and implementation consideration. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. So snackers, if you're just getting to this episode and you didn't understand what Kareem and I talked about in 189, go back. You can watch that now. You have a little more context, pun intended, again. And Shannon, hopefully we can have you on again in the future.
And Shannon, I'll be sending you my MCP server after this.
Oh, that's great. Well, I can't wait to put that in production, Kareem, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, snackers.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Great to be on, guys.